Mike with the VWs. Again, this is top mistakes from just a DIY like beetle and bus restorer, VW restorer for just regular people who aren't specialists, and what are the kind of mistakes that you might make or things to learn. There's the 61 Beetle, and here's the 66 bus. So I have my list of top 20, it's actually top 25, and I'm going numbers 6 through 10. So the number 6 problem that I had when I was building engines, it has to do with like tuning the engine and intake leaks, which cause really weird behavior. And you try to tune the carbs, and you try to do the valves, and you try to do everything, and nothing ever works right. And then what happens is you check your intake manifolds here, and if there's any leakage of air here or under here or anywhere on the carb, what happens is you will literally never be able to tune it. So the dual carbs, they kind of act like they kind of huff the air down through the jets, and then they pull the gas through, and it vaporizes the gas. And a critical part of that is to have everything sealed in the intake manifold. So if you take this as an example intake manifold, if there's any leakage here or here, where the air would come in, so this is a different one, which actually is anyway, you need gaskets that really seal well. And so what I had is regular fiber gaskets like this, and they work great, and I used Permatex on there, but this is where I had just not sealed them properly, and so I wound up with a problem of, it took me a couple weeks to figure out what the hell was wrong with my motor. And then I finally took the thing off. Well, the way that I identified it is by when you run the engine, you take carb cleaner, and you just spray it right around all those places, and if it changes the idle, then you know that you have an intake leak. So you spray it around here and around here, and if it changes the idle. And so what I had done is I got this stuff called Remflex. You can use that for exhaust or intake gaskets, and at least in a desperate situation you can. And I cut out a gasket. This one I did for exhaust, but it's fatter. Like, you see how thick that is? Like, look at the thickness of these gaskets. That's like maybe 3 millimeters or something like that. This is pretty fat, and it collapses when you tighten it down. So I did this on the exhaust when I had imperfect fits, and when I had an air intake leak. And once you solve all the leaks on both the intake and the exhaust, it's just way easier to tune everything, and you don't have a lot of mysterious behavior. So I also had an exhaust problem just with things not fitting quite right. Again, I fixed it with Remflex. What is the Remflex? It's this stuff here. Let's see, Remflex. Looks like this, Remflex gasket material. It seems to be basically meant for exhaust gaskets. Like I said, I used it on the intake once only because it's fatter. But probably, it's probably best to stick with those fiber gaskets on there and Permatex Aviation. But anyway, that was number 6, is intake leaks causing the engine to not be tunable. Okay, so number 7. Number 7, oh, that was the body work. When you're doing body work and you're welding, and this is my welder over here. So you're welding something, and especially if you're doing sheet metal. So I had done stuff like this. It's very imperfect, but if you're welding it, just want to show the best technique that I've found for welding it and not blowing through it. So when you're setting up your sheet metal, you can see here I had used sheet metal to do various things. I just got this as weld steel from Lowe's, but the thing that I wanted to show is when you're doing the welding, it's best to make your pieces of metal have a gap that's about 1 millimeter, and then the way I do it is I set mine on 2 for speed and on A for the voltage. And then you don't want to do any kind of angle like this, and you don't want to touch only one side or the other. You want to go straight up and down and just touch it straight up and down, and then that'll get you a little round little round spot there, and you just go up, and you just touch it each time, and that 1 millimeter winds up closing up and you don't blow through the steel. And it took me just some experimentation, as I'm not any kind of professional welder, nor have I done that much body work, but it just took some experimentation for me to get that right where I wasn't blowing through it. And you know, this is not perfect, but what I wound up getting is just kind of, you know, this side was really bad and kind of lumpy, but you know, I was able to do the welding again with that 1 millimeter straight on. So that was a good thing that I learned. So that was number 7. Number 8, oh man, the defroster tubes, a huge pain in the ass. So I was doing the body on this Beetle, and you have these defrosters right here, you can see, and what happens is from the heater tubes, the defrosters, they come up here, and you see these tubes here? There are these tubes. You may not be able to see it very well, but you can see the tube clamps and the tubes that come up from the heater channels, and that comes up right through here. And I had this problem that I could not clamp that new tube onto there, and so I basically opened this whole thing up by cutting this, flapping it open, got those tubes on there, and then had to repair these sections of the body. So the one thing that I just learned is, like, when you get the heater tubes, you know, make sure that you know the size of this, because I needed to use an adapter here, or wrap that with some kind of a metal tape. And then the bottom one, the new heater channels have a larger opening, which is like more like 1.25 inches or something like that. And then the top one is more like 1 inch, something like that, or maybe it was 1.25 and 1.5 at the bottom. But either way, you have to do an adapter so you can use the one hose size, and just reaching that bottom area to connect it was an absolute huge pain in the ass in order to repair that metal. So, you know, that was number 8, defroster tubes. 9 is just painting. Yeah, I'm terrible at painting, but I wanted to, you can see here, there's still paint here from where I painted. I painted both the bus and the Beetle, and they were painted the exact same way. They both had the same sort of finish on them, which is very not that professional. But what I wanted to say about painting is, you know, I bought this auto touch-up here, this brand, for the L282, and I used the primer that came with it and the clear coat, which is this blue one. And less is more in terms of the you want to spray a really nice fine mist on there of both the primer and let it dry completely, and then do another fine mist and another fine mist. And my biggest problem with painting is that I put too much paint on, and I'm too impatient in letting it dry. So I needed to put a lot less paint on and allow it to dry completely, and then again put a lot less paint on. And so really it was just a matter of patience. Another thing that I did is I put on paint before the primer or the lower coat was dry, and you wind up getting a sort of a shrinkage, and it looks like this. If you can see that with the various angles, but what happens is the primer was not dry, and then when I put this coat on, what happens is it dries, the top coat is drying, and it pulls these sort of like spider veins really of the bottom, and then you're like, oh shit, it's happening all over the place. And so you know that I've got that there and here in a number of places, and I wouldn't have had that if I were just more patient. So I just wanted to say, painting, you know, let the coat, let it dry, just put a very light mist on, and you know, it'll turn out great if you let it dry and just have very fine particles. And then the number 10th one that I wanted to talk about is when I was doing the wiring harness. So, you know, the wiring, there's a whole bunch of gobbledygook wires in there, but the place where the wiring harness goes is up through here, and you have to pull the wiring harness on this model, which is a 61, pull the wiring harness up through here, up around here, and it has to go past the this light. And I had there were a couple of screws here that were in there from the screw holes, and there were little points were there, and as I was pulling the wiring harness through, it was catching on that and coming down here, and I couldn't get it to come past here. And then of course then the wiring harness comes down here and across under there. And I just wanted to say, with the wiring harness, clear all pathways and tape it down nice and solidly, and then when you're pulling it through, make sure you don't have anything like these screws that I had here that were catching on it. And you know, the wiring harness pull, just, I mean, I was sweating, and I just had a terrible time getting that wiring harness through. I didn't do the wiring harness on the bus, so it still has, you know, 60-year-old wires in there, and they're very brittle, and every once in a while I get that outside rubber kind of chips off. So I really should do the wiring harness on the bus, but I put an all-new harness on the Beetle. The other thing about wiring harnesses, this one has snowflake taillights. So these snowflake taillights, they only have the one bulb, but it has the two things for brake and turn signal taillights. So what I had to do is I had to get a 3-to-2 trailer light switch in order to get a 61 wiring harness to interrupt the brake lights with the blinker. So it sounds complicated, but say you have your brake lights on and you turn your blinker on. One brake light is on, the other brake light is blinking in terms of the direction you're going. And that interruption of the brake light or tail light in order to do the blinker, you don't get with some wiring harnesses and some of the turn signal switches, because they don't have that interruption thing correct. Maybe the wiring harness has it, but the interrupter from the switch didn't have it. Whatever the case, you get one of these 3-to-2 trailer wiring things. I'll just show what that is just to finish up this 6 through 10. So this thing that I got here, see how it says you go in with the ground, the tail light, left turn, brake, and right turn, and then you go out with the ground, the tail, left and right turn. So you're basically merging in your brake and your turn, and it comes out, and then that little device can interrupt your brake light with your turn signal. And then the other thing I wanted to mention on this guy here is I had the most frustrating thing on the turn signal relay, and that is that the turn signal relay, especially if you switch from 6 to 12 volts, and if you have a bulb ever burn out, or you're using a 6-volt bulb and a 12-volt fixture, whatever, it'll blink fast. So one will blink double fast, and the other will blink the correct speed, and you're just like, what the hell's going on? Why is my turn signal blinking twice as fast? I've had that on the bus in this car, this Beetle, and turns out you can get a relay that's just like the normal relay. It looks the same, it's square, but it's for LED lights. And what that does is your electrical voltage doesn't change the speed of the blink. In other words, if you burn out a bulb, it's not going to blink twice as fast. It's great. So I would highly recommend getting the LED version of your turn signal relay. You can literally just take the relay code and then type LED. You'll get something that looks exactly the same, but it's for LEDs, and it does a fixed speed blink without the voltage determining the blink speed. So anyway, that was tips 6 through 10, and that is intake leaks cause really weird stuff that you cannot tune the engine. The body welded in straight lines with a 1 millimeter gap. Defroster tubes, a huge pain to connect the clamps, so pay close attention to that and do it early in terms of if you're replacing that and doing the body. Painting, do mist, very fine mist, less is more. Primer has to dry completely before you put the overcoat on, or else you get the spidery stuff. And on the wiring harness, make sure to pull it, feed it through, don't have any screws or anything to have it hang up. And then of course those last two things of if you're doing snowflakes, you need the 3 to 2 converter for the interruption. And on the blinker, you want to have an LED version of the blinker so that it does a fixed timing on the blink and is not messed up by the voltage or current or whatever when you have a burnt out light bulb. So anyway, that is the tip 6 through 10. So I'll see you guys next time.